All right, looks like we've got a good amount of people on. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today. We're really excited to talk to you. We're so excited that you all have decided to participate in a press event at Fall Meeting this year. We look forward to working with you all, and so we wanted to take this opportunity to prepare you a little bit for what's coming and answer any questions that you might have. If you do have any questions during this webinar today, please put them into the Q&A box, not the chat box, and then we'll address them all at the end. So you can put them in at any time, but we'll answer all questions at the end. And please remember to mute your microphone if you haven't already. All right, so who we are today. Hi, I am Lauren LaPuma. I work in the Media Relations Department at AGU. I've been working with all of you, our press officers at your institutions who are organizing these press events, and I've been working with them to schedule everything and get everything ready. Also joining me today are the rest of our media relations team. We have Nancy Bompey, who is our fearless leader, the director of media relations, and we have Liza Lester and Katie Brendel. And then we also have, who's not pictured here, Larry O'Hanlon, who works in our department, and he manages all of our social media channels. So all of us are here to help you and answer any questions that you might have, and we'll also be available during the meeting as well. So what we're going to talk about today, first, I'm going to give everyone an overview of the fall meeting press operation and how it works, and then talk about the logistics of all of your individual press events. We'll talk about how to prepare a presentation for reporters, what to expect on the day of your press event and during the press event, what to expect after it's over, and then we'll go into resources and then what comes next between now and the meeting, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So just to start, a little bit of an overview of the fall meeting press operation and talk about some logistics. So as I'm sure you all are aware, this year is very unusual. It's our first completely virtual meeting. So it's new to all of us. We're not exactly sure what to expect, but what we do think is that we'll be getting around 200 or so members of the media are expected to register. We have about 150 registered so far right now. It's less than we've had in previous years when we're in person, but that's to be expected. But there are everyone from reporters and bloggers and book writers and filmmakers to journalism students and educators, and also press officers or science communicators like yourselves. So it's a wide, varied group of people who usually come to our meeting from the press. We often have many major news outlets represented, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Associated Press, BBC, and we're expecting most of those outlets to also come this year as well. So we think it's going to be a good meeting, even though it's all virtual, and we hope that it goes very well and that you enjoy it. So we have 3 types of press events that we're offering this year. The first is press conferences, and this is where researchers like yourselves will present breaking new research results to reporters in a kind of formal, presentation style setting. So your panels of 2 to 4 speakers will each give a short presentation to the press, and then we'll follow it up by questions from reporters. Briefings are very similar. They're just like press conferences. The only difference is that you're not presenting news. You're just giving updates about ongoing areas of research or a project or something that's coming up in the future. Still in that formal setting where you're going to give a presentation and then followed by Q&A. Press conferences and briefings, for all intents and purposes here, are pretty much the same. Like I said, in format, they're the same. And I'll go over the platforms for each too, but the only difference, like I said, is press conferences is where we actually share new research results. The third kind of event we're doing are media roundtables, and roundtables are a little bit different in that they give you the opportunity as a researcher to provide reporters with information that's background, about an ongoing area of research or perhaps an upcoming project or mission, but it's a more informal discussion style setting. So there aren't really formal presentations. It's more just discussion, and reporters are encouraged to ask questions at any time. And again, it's a panel of 2 to 4 experts, but the main focus is on discussion. And I'll go over more details of these in just a minute. And if anyone is unsure what kind of event they're taking place in, please feel free to reach out to us at any time. We'll help you. But the main thing, so we'll go into detail now more about the press conferences and the briefings. If your event takes place the week of December 7th, that's Monday through Friday, December 7th through 11th, that means you are either in a press conference or a briefing. So the way these are going to work this year, like I said, it's a panel of 2 to 4 speakers that give a short presentation of their results or their project in plain language. So total, that goes for about 20 minutes of speaking time. And then we open it up to Q&A from reporters for about 25 minutes. So the total time for the formal event is 45 minutes and will end after 45 minutes or when there are no more questions. What will happen is us, AGU Media Relations staff, we will introduce the panel and moderate everything. We will moderate the Q&A, and I'll talk about that in just a second. We'll advance the slides, which you will send to us in advance. So what we want you to do as researchers is just focus on presenting your work to the reporters and giving your presentation. We don't want you to have to worry about any of the technical aspects. We'll take care of all of that. We are also asking that you record yourself giving your presentation for the press ahead of time, just as a backup in case internet goes out or there's some kind of technical difficulty. We just want to have multiple backups just in case so that we can still present your work to the press. And these events will be recorded and posted to YouTube for a future reference so that reporters who can't tune in can watch at a later date. So a little bit about the logistics for these events. So these are going to be done through Zoom webinar, which is the platform we are using right now for this webinar. So so AGU will act as the host, and the speakers, so that's you researchers, and then the press officers who organize the event, you will all be added as a panelist. We will send you all virtual backgrounds, which you can use that will identify yourself as a panelist or a press officer. And you don't have to use those, but we encourage you to use them. So what happens is you will receive via email a direct link as a panelist to this webinar. And you should not share it because it's a unique link just for you. Every panelist will get their own individual link. And you will get reminder emails beforehand, before the press conference or press event starts with your link. So hopefully you will have it and not have any issues. In Zoom webinar, the hosts and panelists will be able to share their video, share their screen, and then also speak over audio as we are now. You guys won't need to worry about sharing your screen because we as AGU will be advancing the slides, but you can have your video on and obviously speak through your microphone. But the attendees will only be able to listen and view, though they won't be able to use their video or share their screen. They will be able to use audio, but we're not going to allow them to do so in these events. So after that 45-minute window has passed, what happens often with press conferences is reporters want to stick around for more discussion, talk to some researchers one-on-one or in a small group. So what we're going to do is as soon as that 45-minute presentation and Q&A part ends, we'll open up a separate, what we're calling discussion room for additional questions, and that will be done through Zoom meetings. And we'll send you a link in the chat box of the Zoom webinar to enter that room. So after the press conference is over, you should stick around for this additional discussion room, which will end, when there are no more questions or after 30 minutes at the most. And you can hide, when you're presenting, you can hide yourself or hide the video view to make sure that the video isn't blocking your view of the slides. And we can go over that in more detail if you like. We will have teleconference lines available as a backup just in case Zoom goes down for some reason. So that way you would just give your presentation via voice and there wouldn't be any video, but we'll hopefully won't have to resort to that, but we just have it as a backup. The way questions will work is that in the main Zoom webinar, reporters are going to enter their questions through the Q&A box, just like you guys are today. And then AGU staff, we will pose the questions to the panel on the behalf of the reporter. So we don't want you to respond to any questions directly in that Q&A box. Like I said, we just want you to focus on giving your presentation. We will handle directing the questions to the panel and responding to the reporters. So we don't want you to worry about that. So roundtables are a little bit different. So these are the events that take place the week of December 14th. So those will be taking place Monday through Thursday, the 14th through the 17th. Like I said, these are more informal. It's more of a conversational setting where you guys can talk about your projects and then reporters can ask questions at any time. You may have slides that you want to present, but we want you to keep the presentation aspect very short, less than 10 minutes. And if you want to have additional slides that are just for visual aids, that is absolutely fine and actually encouraged. But we really want to focus this more on the discussion rather than having a formal presentation. Again, AGU will introduce the panel, but the press officers and PIOs who organize the actual roundtable will do the moderating of the discussion, and they will advance any slides that are used. And PIOs, we recommend that you begin by just simply introducing each panelist or having each panelist introduce themselves, and then perhaps open the discussion with a question or posing a topic or discussion topic to the panel. And we can talk about that in more detail if you like. The roundtables will end after 45 minutes or when there are no more questions or when the discussion ends, whichever is sooner. And roundtable logistics, so these will be done through regular old Zoom meetings. We will send you a direct link to the meeting itself. AGU again will act as the host, but in Zoom meetings, just like there is normally, there will be no distinction between the attendees and the panelists. So the reporters can ask their questions and chat with you directly via video and audio. There's not going to be a separate Q&A box. You can use the chat function if you like, but we prefer that they just ask their questions directly and you discuss it directly with them. They will not be recorded or posted to the web anywhere. And so you can, as a host and a participant, use your video, share your screen, and speak via audio. So you can share slides if you'd like, any visual aids that you have, and interact directly with reporters. Okay, so that's the general overview of how everything will work. But now I'm going to give you a little bit more detail on how you actually prepare a presentation for the press. And this is mostly for the participants of press conferences and briefings, but roundtable participants, it's still a good background information to have. And in case you do prepare any slides, please use this as a guide. So for you guys in the press conferences and the briefings, you're going to create a presentation for reporters that is roughly 5 to 7 minutes long. We recommend having about 1 slide per minute of speaking time, so it's not very many slides. And we recommend you use less text to try to focus on the visual aids, so it's not too text heavy. And everything should be in plain language. You should try to avoid or reduce the amount of jargon you're using throughout your presentation. Try to say everything so that a high schooler could understand it. Try not to get bogged down into the methods or the weeds of your science. Try to focus, excuse me, keep it a high-level overview of your results or your project. We also sometimes recommend on the final slide of your presentation to summarize your main message again and include your contact information as well, so reporters can reach out to you afterwards for more details, more information. And everything that you share in your presentation must be usable for reporters, which means you can't have anything that's copyrighted, and I will go into the details of that in just a second. So for press conferences, the content of your presentation should hit these 4 points: the news, the impact, the context, and the take-home message. The news is basically the who, what, when, where, and why of your work. This is who we are, this is what we did, when and where we did it, this is what we found. So this is your result. What is the result that you found that you are presenting today? What is new? The impact is, why does that result matter? Why should people care about that result, and how this result affects people? The third part is the context, which means what has changed? Now you have this result, this is why it's important, but what has changed compared to what we already knew about this? What is the new element? And then the take-home message, what does all of that mean? And again, consider the words you use. We want everything to be in plain language. You only have 5 to 7 minutes to get your message across, to talk about your results or your project. So that means that reporters have a very limited time to absorb everything that you're saying. So you really need to be clear and use plain language. If you have to use any technical terms or acronyms, that's okay, but please define them and try to keep them to a minimum if possible. Try avoid using scientific shorthand. For example, we always say, say carbon dioxide, not CO2. You want to spell everything out, write everything out, rather than using abbreviations. And be aware that there are some words that have multiple meanings, so just be aware of that. We want you to keep your presentation simple. We keep your slides visually appealing, include photos, and I'll give you examples of those in a second: photos, illustrations, infographics. You can have props available if you have them with you in your home or wherever you're giving your presentation. This photo here on this slide shows some props that a USGS geologist used a couple years ago, demonstrating different constructions of buildings, and the one on the left is more stable in when earthquakes happen, and the one on the right is not. So that was a really great prop that he had brought to illustrate that concept. If you have any props with you, absolutely feel free to use them. We encourage it. Try to keep your color scheme simple, and I'll show you an example of that too. If you have to use a chart or a graph or a figure from a paper, please make sure that it's simple and easy to read. Like I said, there's only limited time here to convey this information. There isn't time to go over the specifics of very complicated graphs, so we try to keep them simple and easy to read. Make sure everything's not too cluttered, and everything should be in widescreen format, that 16:9 aspect ratio. And we will actually give you all a slide template that you can use. That's the official AGU slide template. You don't have to use that, but we recommend it if you want to just not have to think about it. So here's some examples of good visuals that you could include with your presentation. Any images you have of yourself or your colleagues in the field, doing work, collecting your data, those are great. For example, these researchers using this giant drill in the Arctic. Very, very helpful. A simple graphic like this is showing the altitude at which certain satellites fly in the International Space Station compared with different layers of the atmosphere. It's simple, it's colorful, it's easy to read. That would be an example of something that would be good to use. Simple illustrations. This is an illustration of Curiosity rover in Gale Crater. It doesn't have to be sophisticated, it doesn't have to be fancy. It's simple, but it just gets the point across. It shows Curiosity, where it's located, and then some of the different rock layers around the crater. So that would be something you could easily do. If you have to use a graph and chart, this is an example of one that could be used. It's because there's just one piece of information that the reporters would need to take away from this, which is the change in this red line. You see this sharp decline towards 2016. That's something that they could easily pick up during the time of your presentation. Something like this, on the other hand, is far too complicated. We want you to not use anything that would look like this. It's too much information to tease out of this in such a short period of time. Another one that's too complicated is this chart. These are examples from actual press conferences we've done in the past. So this is a chart that someone actually wanted to include once. We really recommend you don't include something that is this complicated. We want you to keep it very simple. Slide layout. So like I said, we want you to keep things simple, use a simple color scheme. Try not to use photos as backgrounds and use these different colors for your text in your background. Try to keep things to black and white if you can. Add some photos in there, don't have too much text. And lastly, resist the urge to collage. This is an actual slide from a couple of years ago. This scientist was very excited about all the glacier retreat, but it's really just too much information. You can't even really see what's going on here, what the glaciers are. If you want to use a picture, use 1 or 2 max. You don't need to use 20. 1 or 2 will get the point across. And so if you are using any images that you don't have the copyright to or that you are not the owner of, you want to use something that you can share with reporters, which means it has to be either in the public domain or have a Creative Commons license. And if copyright law especially for images, can get complicated. So if you have any questions about an image that you want to use, please reach out to us. We're happy to help you figure that out. If you're looking for photos, anything taken by a government agency is free to use. It's in the public domain. Good places to look are Wikimedia Commons and Creative Commons. But again, you do need to just check the specific license for that individual photo. Don't just assume that because it's on Wikimedia Commons that it is automatically free for you to use. Flickr, there are some good Flickr accounts. NASA has several, NOAA has some, USGS, any other US agencies, a lot of them have Flickr accounts. Creative Commons even has a Flickr account. This is a really good resource for looking for images. And then you can also just search by Google. And if you want to do this and make sure that you're looking for the correct thing, like for example, this image search here for Jupiter, you'd want to go over to the right where it says tools, and then go click on usage rights and then search for Creative Commons licenses only. And like I said, reach out to us if you have any questions. We're happy to help you prepare your presentation, look over your presentation, help you find images, help you determine what you can use and what you can't. So we're always here as a resource. So on the day of, we'll give you a little bit more logistics and know what to expect. So you're going to try to enter the Zoom webinar or Zoom meeting about 30 minutes before the actual event starts, just to make sure you're there and ready and prepped to go. So we're going to give you those links through email, like I said. So you're going to enter the webinar or the Zoom meeting through those links. We're going to provide you with virtual backgrounds, like I said, that will identify yourself as a panelist or a press officer. We encourage you to use those. But if for some reason your internet is acting up or you're having technical difficulties, and you can turn off your virtual background and even turn off your video if you want to save bandwidth. That way reporters can still hear you even if they can't see you. That's what we really want. We want them to be able to hear what you're saying and hopefully see you, but if you have to turn that off for a few minutes, that's okay. Like I said, for the press conferences and briefings, you're going to stick around for that discussion room that immediately follows, and we will send you the link to that, and we'll also put it in the chat box of your specific event. Like I said, AGU will staff, we will moderate everything, we'll keep everything on track. We'll remind you of all of this as it's happening during the actual event. Don't worry if you forget something, you can ask us at any time, even during the event. If you're not sure what's happening, we'll keep it all on track. And we're kind of expecting that there's going to be some difficulties at some point. Things are going to go wrong. Nothing ever goes off without a hitch, and that's okay. We're expecting it to happen. Try not to let it get you flustered. Just focus on talking about your own work and presenting to reporters, and we'll try to take care of all the rest of it. And then here are some best practices for presenting virtually. So make sure you have a microphone and headphones. If possible, make sure you're in a room with good light. Be mindful of your camera placement and what's behind you. We're going to give you those virtual backgrounds, like I said, but if you need to turn it off for any reason, make sure there's nothing behind you that you don't want seen. Remember, because you're going to be visible at all times. So just make sure that there's nothing behind you don't want people to see. Try to avoid being in a room that echoes, like a kitchen that has lots of hard surfaces. Be in a room that has softer surfaces, like a living room with a couch, or in a room with clothes or a closet. Remember to mute your mic when you're not speaking, so when the other panelists are presenting, you give them the floor. And like I said, if your connection is poor or goes in and out, you can turn off your background or video. And also beforehand, make sure you've downloaded the latest version of Zoom. This will help ensure that there aren't any bugs that pop up that day, and that the software can open as it needs to. What should you wear? So we usually recommend wearing business casual. I know that not much of you will be on camera, just the top half of you, if even that, but we recommend business casual. Excuse me. Wear solid muted colors. Try to avoid bright, loud prints. Those just won't show up very well, especially with a virtual background. Keep your accessories simple. You could wear a jacket and tie if you want, but it's not recommended. You don't have to. If you have a shirt, for example, with a logo from your institution, that's fine to wear as well. But we just basically recommend keeping things simple as possible. So what is on the record? So if you all are new to working with the press, anything that is said during a press event is considered to be on the record. And what that means is that anything you say can be published and attributed to you by name. So here's a couple examples here. Here's an example of something that's on the record and how that would be attributed in a news story. Just for your own edification, off the record means that what you say is for the reporter's use only and not to be published. Now, like I said, everything said during a press conference or press event and everything said during our fall meeting press events is on the record. So don't say anything that you wouldn't be comfortable saying in print. And you can't backtrack if you say something, and then you say, actually, wait, don't publish that. That's not how it works. You have to specify before you even begin a conversation with the reporter what is on the record and what is off. But during all events, for all intents and purposes, everything is on the record. There's a third category that's called on background or not for attribution, which means that the reporter can use something you say in a story, but it can't be attributed to you by name or job title. So we want you to not worry about that either. Just assume that everything that is said from the moment you step into the meeting, or in this case, virtually join the meeting, until the moment you leave is on the record. So just be mindful of that during the whole time. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. How many journalists will attend? So it varies. This is a common question we get from panelists ahead of time, and it's hard to say. Like I said, we're expecting about 200 reporters or members of the media to attend the meeting this year. That does not mean that 200 people will be joining your press event. It's probably maybe, a tenth to a half of that. It's hard to say. It could be 2 reporters. It could be 50 reporters, depending on the press event and what the topic is. It depends on what else is happening in the news that day. You should just be prepared to present to as many journalists as there are, depending on how few or how many. And even if there are only a few journalists, don't be discouraged. There could just be one journalist in the event, and that person could write for the Associated Press. And then the next day, that news story is in every newspaper in the country. So, just because there's 1 or 2 doesn't mean that your story won't get picked up. And just because there are many doesn't mean it will either. There may be some other news that day that might trump what your research is. So just be aware of that and plan accordingly. Preparing for questions. So A good thing to do ahead of time is maybe just take a quick minute and brainstorm any potential questions that reporters might ask of you. Try role playing with friends or colleagues, especially people who are not scientists. Feel out, what kinds of things your presentation sparks in them, what questions they have. Use transition statements, and I'll get to that in a second. Think about if there's anything that you're saying that might be contentious, and then how you would respond to that. And if there's something that you really can't answer, feel free to recommend other experts. So for example, if there's someone asks you a question and either you're uncomfortable answering or you don't know the answer, there are things you can say. Instead, you can say, I don't know the answer, but I can find out and get back to you. And then you can follow up with that reporter later. Or you can put them in touch with someone who does know. So that's where recommending another expert comes in. If they ask you a question that is totally beyond the scope of your study, or you are not comfortable answering, for example, if it's of a political nature, you could say something like, that's beyond my area of expertise, but what I can tell you is, and then bridge back to your main research points. So that's called a transition statement. You're saying, okay, that's beyond the area of my expertise, that may be beyond the scope of my study, but what I can tell you is this, and you bridge back to your main points. Okay, and so that's basically what will happen during the press conference or the press event. And then afterwards, what comes next? The story continues. It's not totally over then. Reporters may contact you for even more for formal interviews. They may want to interview for TV or radio. So just be available by phone, by email, or Zoom. Provide your contact information in your presentation. Be available that week and maybe even the entire meeting. You don't have to be available 24/7 the whole meeting, but just be aware that reporters may contact you by phone or by email or by Zoom, or want to set up a meeting via Zoom. Most of the reporters who are attending this year are from the United States or Europe. We have a couple from Asia, but mostly it's US and Europe. So those are the ones that you'll expect. So hopefully you won't be getting any requests at odd hours of the day and night, but just during your normal waking hours. Okay, so resources and next steps. So I know I've kind of shoved a lot of information at you guys today, but I'm gonna send all this to you so you can peruse it in a little more detail. Next, you're gonna go ahead and make your presentation for your press event and prepare. Like I said, we'll send you this fall meeting slide template. You can use that if you'd like. Like I said, presentations for roundtables are optional, but if you do have some slides, keep them very short, and be sure to include your contact information. Excuse me. AGU Media Relations staff, that's us. We can give you feedback, we can help you, and the press officer organizing your event can also help you, give you some feedback, or just help you in your presentation in general. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. Then, like I said, for press conferences and briefings, you're gonna have to record yourself giving your presentation as a backup. The easiest way to probably do this is for the press officer who's organizing the event to just schedule a dry run. And then you would just do it as a dry run and then send us the recording afterwards. But if you'd rather just do yours individually by yourself, that is fine too, as long as you get it to us. And so the slides and recorded presentations are due to us by November 30th. That's the day before the meeting starts. And press officers, when you send it to us, just let me know what order the presentations should go in. So who's going to present first, second, etc. You can also do a dry run with us AGU staff in Zoom webinar, like in the actual platform we're going to use that week of November 30th, which is the first week of the meeting. We're not requiring you to do that, but if anyone is new to this and would like that extra, step, then we're totally happy to schedule that. So press officers, I will reach out to you individually to see if that's something you want to do. Like I said, we will send you those direct links to the Zoom webinar or the Zoom meeting. We'll send them to you by November 23rd, which is next week. So you'll have that, and then you will get reminders from Zoom periodically too about your event. Zoom actually has some really great webinars themselves and trainings on these platforms, which I will send you a link to. You can feel free to watch them if you're new to presenting this way. You don't have to, but they're actually very helpful. And then press officers, if you have any other materials that will go with the press conference, if you have a press release, if you have audio or video files that will go with the slides, you can also send them to us, and we will send you a link for a Google form to submit those items as well. And we will make sure that on the AGU website, on our media center, that those materials are associated with the particular press event. So press conferences, for you guys that are just in press conferences, one thing to keep in mind is you want to wait to speak to reporters. your presentations are going to basically be embargoed until the press conference, which means that reporters, we're asking them not to write stories on it until the press conference takes place. So if your institution's press office is unaware, please make sure they know too, so they don't send out a press release ahead of time and scoop us. The point is that the news should break during the press conference and not before, because otherwise, reporters might not come and cover it if the news has already been out there. So please wait to speak until the press conference. If reporters contact you ahead of time, that does happen sometimes. Sometimes they're just doing some pre-reporting where they're getting some, information about the press conference, but they're not going to cover it yet. That is okay. But if reporters do contact you ahead of time, please let us know. All the abstracts for your presentations are already online. Reporters can already see them. And then starting December 1st, they will be able to see the pre-recorded talks for the oral presentations and the posters. So, they're going to see them. They may contact you ahead of time. Just let us know and we'll help you, tell you how to respond to them and ask them to wait. And then we will also send you some information to include in your scientific presentation, describing that there is a press conference happening about these results and to please not publish their stories before then. So some resources, and I'm going to send all of these to you via email as well. We have an entire guide for preparing for a press conference, and we have a whole guide for working with the media. We have a whole page on our website on how to share your science with people outside of academia. We have examples of slides from past press conferences that we thought that were made very well. On our YouTube channel, we have recordings of all of our past press conferences for the past maybe 10 years or so that you can watch if you're just curious about how it usually works in person. Obviously, it's different this year because it's virtual, but the format will be very, very similar. And we will send all these resources to you in a shared Dropbox folder. I'll send you a link to that so you can download everything, download slides, download these guides. You can download the slide template, like I mentioned, the virtual backgrounds, everything will be put together for you in this shared Dropbox folder. I'll share it with all of you and your press officers, as well as the slides to this particular presentation that we're giving right now. Okay, and with that, we will open it up to questions. So great. Katie, my colleague Katie, is gonna tell us if there are any questions coming.
Yes, we already have some in the queue. So if anybody has any questions that have popped up while Lauren was presenting, please go to the bottom of your screen and click on the Q&A, and you can submit your questions through the Q&A section. So the first question is about the media roundtables. They're wondering if AGU is going to be the meeting host, but the PIO is going to be advancing the slides. Is the PIO supposed to do the screen share?
Yes, so AGU will host, but the PIO will screen share and advance the slides.
Great. Another question is about Zoom, the Zoom platform. Some folks can't install the Zoom desktop client because they might have restrictions at their particular organization or agency, and they need to use Zoom on the browser instead. But they're saying that Zoom doesn't let you join a meeting that requires registration on a browser. Instead, they require the desktop client. Will that cause any problems with their participation in these press events?
That is a good question and something we have not thought about. So let me find out and we will get back to you. So if you want to just make a note, or Katie, if you want to make a note who asked that, and if anyone else is wondering about that too, we will find out and we will get back to you this week. We'll make sure that it's not a problem for you to join through the browser. Yeah, we'll find out.
No problem. Thank you. Next question is about the discussion rooms after the press conferences and press briefings. Who will be in these discussion rooms and what kind of discussions are expected?
Yeah, so, it's the first time we're doing this, so we're a little unsure. But so to give you some background, what normally happens when we have a meeting in person is that after the formal press conference or press event ends, after that 45 minutes, reporters often stick around and they will go up to the individual presenters and ask further questions and just kind of have a sidebar chat. And so this is supposed to replace that function. So you should enter the discussion room, and we're not really sure who's going to be there. Reporters may come and they may want to talk to you individually, or they may want to pose a question to the group. So it's hard to say what to expect. I think the discussion will probably be pretty informal. They may just ask you for more clarification on what you've presented. They may ask you further questions. They may ask you for other people to chat with, and they may want to just schedule a formal interview with you later. So it's hard to say. And, Nancy and Liza, feel free to jump in here if I'm missing anything.
Yeah, sure. I think what we're trying to mimic in those discussion rooms is, like Lauren said, just that those informal conversations that happen after the press conference. So, we talked to a lot of reporters, and they said that was something that they missed when they've attended other events in the past, and the press conference just ends and they're kicked off Zoom, and that's the end of it. So we're trying to mimic that in a more informal situation, and it will kind of be up to everyone to kind of take turns asking questions and moderate it as needed. We'll probably be sitting in there, at least one of us, just in case, but it should be reporters and just meant to be more informal. So we shall see how it goes. And if you have one and you have feedback for us, please let us know so we can maybe do it differently, or if there's more moderation is needed or anything like that. I mean, new experience for all of us. So.
And I should mention also, there is one exception to this. So the Arctic report card, if anyone here is a part of that panel, the Arctic report card is going to be a little bit different than all the others this year because it's our largest panel and it's in its 15th year. So it's our biggest one. So that one is actually, the press conference itself is going to be an hour, and then the discussion room following will be another hour. So just because there's always a lot of reporter interest in that one. So just be aware of that, which I'm sure if you're a part of that, Teo has already explained to you. So.
Great. So the next question is, who should we email our slides and presentations to for the press conferences?
Yes, that would be me. So all of the press officers, I will reach out to you, I'm sure many times over the next couple of weeks, and tell you and ask you for your slides. I will send you all my email, and you can, so your press officer should send them to all to me. But if you end up doing it individually, that is fine too. And I'll make sure you all have my email.
Great. If they prepare slides for a media roundtable, are those due to you on November 30th as well?
Yes, we would like them as soon as you can. I mean, if you can get them on the 30th, I know that it's you have an extra week to prepare. So, it's okay if you don't get them exactly on that date, but try to get them as soon as you can.
Great. The next question is, can you please share what role the PIOs will play during the press conference?
Yeah, so during the press conferences, the PIOs, your roles will pretty much be just to watch and make sure that everything goes according to plan. Like I said, we'll do all the moderating and all of that. Your job is kind of just to sit back and relax. Your job is done. You've organized the panel. You've gotten everyone's presentations in, and just kind of be there. And you can help answer additional questions reporters might have. They're looking for additional experts to be there to direct them to other people, help get reporters in contact with the panelists as well if they're having trouble. So you're just kind of there to assist and watch how it all goes.
Great. And there's a question about interacting with reporters. For off the record, do you explicitly say something is off the record to the reporter? And in a conversation with reporter, do we assume that everything else is on the record? Are there ways to ensure that the reporter would honor such an agreement?
Anything you say in a conversation with a reporter, you should assume is on the record. Unless you state clearly beforehand, this information I'm going to give you is off the record. And we really don't recommend you do that or say something that's just on background. Most reporters will honor your request to keep something off the record, but just to be safe, we really just recommend you don't say anything that you wouldn't want published in a story, and just assume everything is on the record and just go from there.
And that goes too for emails, text messages, whatever it might be. So just keep that in mind. If you're casually emailing with someone or texting with a reporter, they can use that information. So to Lauren's point, best to just assume that it's going to be used and not to try to go off the record if you really don't have to.
Yeah, unless there's a really clear, compelling reason why you want to go off the record, I would just avoid it, and just every conversation, every interaction with them is on the record, and assume that, don't say something like, oh, that person's research is garbage. Oh, wait, don't print that. Don't talk, poorly about your colleagues or anything like that. Just everything, assume that everything will be used.
Yes, very good general rule. I'm seeing some folks in the chat commenting on not being able to be heard or seen right now. I think Nancy, at the beginning of the webinar, put in the chat that all attendees are actually muted and not on video. So if you're speaking and you want to ask a question and we can't hear you, that's why. So please feel free to type something into the Q&A box and we'll get to your question.
And we're doing this to mimic. This is how a press conference will happen. So if you're thinking about what it's going to be like, it's going to be basically like this. So Katie, Lauren, and I, and then actually you can see some other folks from our media relations. We're all like panelists. So pretend that we're the scientists giving the presentations. Lauren shared the screen, and all of you are basically the reporters who are going to be asking the questions through Q&A. And like one of us, like Katie's doing, will read out the questions. So that's how the webinar is going to work. That's how the press conferences and the press briefings are going to work. When you go into that briefing room afterwards, that'll be in Zoom meeting, which I'm sure you've been on a million by now, where everyone's on audio, everyone's on video, unless they turn it off, unless you mute yourself or you turn your video off, but everyone has access to those controls. So that's kind of the difference. So yeah, if you haven't been in a webinar, this is what it's going to be like, a little bit different than a normal Zoom meeting. But we are putting together lots of information for the reporters too, so they understand that as well. So, and we will make that announcement. I don't know if Laura mentioned, but in the beginning of the press conference, we're going to make an announcement too about this is how this works, so all the reporters understand how everything goes.
Yeah, and if anyone right now wants to speak or say anything, you can write something in the chat, and I can actually allow you to talk through my controls.
So the next question we have is, for a roundtable, we would like to provide a media packet with photos, other visuals, links, and resources for the journalists instead of slides. What's the best way to do that in this virtual format?
Yeah, that is a great question. Yeah, so we are going to put together, all that kind of materials we will put together and we'll post it on the AGU website. So you will submit all that information through a Google form, which is forthcoming. So Katie's created this. You will submit all of your info through a form, and then we will put everything on the website. One caveat though is that everything that you send us has to live somewhere else on the internet. So basically we'll just be providing links to that information. You could also add it into the chat of the actual Zoom meeting during the roundtable. So you can do it that, and then you will also send it to us through this form, and that way we will make sure that reporters have it. And then during the meeting, you can also say that specifically that you have that available to them.
Great. The next question is, will we learn in advance who is presenting in the press conference we are presenting?
Yes, you should hopefully know. If you don't know, reach out to the press officer or the PIO who organized it, and they will get that information. But yes, you should definitely know. That's kind of why we like to do dry runs or rehearsals ahead of time, so that you can talk to your colleagues and the other panelists and get to know them and see what they're presenting, and make sure there's not too much there's no overlap between your presentations, that you all are complementing each other, figure out what order you want to go in. So you should know and ideally do a dry run. And if you have any questions, talk to your press officer who organized it, or reach out to us at AGU.
Can we present new results during a roundtable?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
Great.
As long as you're okay with reporters potentially, putting those findings in their stories. For example, the only conflict I could see is if you have a paper that's in review at a journal with a strict embargo policy. In that case, you wouldn't want to, because you might violate that policy. But so just check with that. But as long as you're okay with reporters, writing about their results, absolutely, go ahead.
And then in terms of the panelists sending videos of their talks, is there a platform that you'd like for them to record their video?
No, whatever you prefer, pretty much. As long as we have, your slides and then your voice explaining what is on the slides, that is all we need. So whatever format you would prefer. You could host your own little Zoom meeting with just you, or you could do a dry run with all of your panelists and send it to us that way, or you could do it a different way, however you like. And if you have any questions, if you're concerned about how to do that yourself, feel free to reach out to us and we'll help you.
For the roundtables, is there a way to call on reporters, or do they just speak up?
They will speak up, but I believe there's also a hand raise function, or maybe not. Nancy or Katie, I'm not sure if you know.
So these are in Zoom meetings. I think there is, but I imagine that they'll probably just speak up.
They will probably speak up, and we will encourage them to just speak up at any time, but we'll check and see if there is a hand raise function as well.
What is the due date for the Google Forms for supplemental materials?
That is a good question. Have we decided on that, or is it just throughout the whole meeting, Nancy?
Yeah, it's going to be, so there's no due date for that. I'd say though, if you have if you have some supplemental materials that are associated with the press conference, we're going to be obviously getting the materials, trying to get them up as soon as possible. But if you really want them up during a certain date and time, if you can get them in as early as possible, there's a place on the forum that says, don't post this before Wednesday at 4 o'clock. We won't do that. So we will abide by those date and time. So if you want to get it in early, that's great. Up to you, but do realize that it might take us, if you get it in, it may not get up within the next 5 minutes. It may take us a couple hours to get something up. So if you want it up right away, it's best to get it in as early as possible. But that Google form will be available throughout the entire meeting for you to send us information. If you've participated or been to an AGU fall meeting in the past, we had PIOs kind of do it themselves, but the system we had was a little clunky. So we're trying something a little bit different this year to hopefully make it easier to find items and things like that. No due date, but just send us the form when you have that stuff, and we can get it up.
Yeah, we're going to try to get everything up within a couple hours, ideally like as soon as possible after you send it to us, but in case we're busy, it may take a little bit longer.
So what's the video format that you want as a backup? Can scientists do this with their laptop?
Yeah, absolutely. Any kind of format I think will be fine. We'll be able to work with it. So whatever is easiest for you guys. We have editing software and we can convert any formats we need to and make any edits we need to. So whatever is easiest for you guys.
And it's really just meant as a backup, like Lauren noted. Hopefully we won't come to that, but we want to be prepared in case internet goes down, anything goes down. Like Lauren said, we also have a teleconference line that, just in case the Zoom goes down. So lots of backups.
And then we have a clarification question about the roundtables. They're just wanting to clarify that reporters will just speak up and that AGU and/or the PIO will not need to moderate.
Yes, so I think the roundtables are pretty new for us. We only started doing them last year, so we're still kind of working out exactly what the best system is. And because it's virtual this year, obviously we're not exactly sure how it will all work. But what we imagine is that reporters will just speak up. The PIOs can certainly moderate, or if a reporter has a general question and not sure who to direct it to, the PIO could say say like, okay, well, how about this person answer this question? They could direct the question to the proper person, or they could, help moderate the discussion too, if they feel they need to. It really will just depend on the individual event and the discussion. Does that help?
The next question is about videos and slides. This is a good question that came up. Another good question. Everybody's had great questions. Will videos and the slides be able to play with relatively little lag time over Zoom? Or do they need to tell their presenters to include a few images instead of a video in order to show like a time series, for example?
Yeah. Part of the reason why we want you to send us your slides ahead of time is to test that all out. So ideally, we will test everything out ahead of time when you send us your slides and make sure that they all play, with hopefully very little lag time. If you do have a video or even a GIF or something else that you want to play in there, maybe a piece of audio, a good idea is to have that file as a backup separately and to send it to us. When you send us your slides, send us that file separate. So it's in your slides embedded, and then also a separate file. That way, just in case there's a problem with PowerPoint or putting it all together, we can play that file for reporters. And even if worst case scenario, it won't play, we can upload it to the web and give it to reporters that way.
Great. Next question is about media roundtables. Since they will be on the Zoom meeting platform, will reporters be visible?
Yes, if they choose to be. So for the roundtables, we're kind of leaving it up to the reporters whether they want to have their video on or not. They may not. So ideally, they will be visible and you can see them. But they may choose to not have their video on. However, we are going to ask that every reporter identifies themselves by name and affiliation, and ideally in the name that pops up under your video. So right now, like mine says Lauren LaPuma, but if I were a reporter, I might write Lauren LaPuma, Associated Press, or something like that. So you will know who they are, and when they ask a question, we always ask them to identify themselves by name and affiliation, so you'll know who you're talking to.
Great. Because the media roundtables are meant to be a discussion, does it make sense to unmute participants, including reporters, so that they can share in the discussion? And that's assuming, of course, that there aren't hundreds of attendees.
Yeah, and we're kind of not sure what to expect in terms of attendance for the roundtables. Like I said, they're new to us. We only started them last year. Yeah, so it's because it's in Zoom meetings, everyone will by default be able to have their mics on. We'll ask people in the beginning to mute their mics if they're not speaking, but everyone will have the opportunity to speak just directly through their mic. There won't be any distinction between the panelists and the reporters in terms of Zoom for those. So everyone will be able to just ask their questions directly.
Great. And then the last question that we have at the moment is, what about if our panelists aren't able to meld their own backup video with slides? Can those be sent separately?
Sure. Yeah. We could. Yep. I can work with that. I can work with that. Sure. No problem. And oh yeah. And one thing I should mention, which I should have mentioned earlier, we will be putting all the slides together in PowerPoint. So please use PowerPoint. I know some Mac folks like to use Keynote, but please use PowerPoint just to keep it consistent with everything else and just to make sure that everything works properly.
Great. And that's all the questions that we had.
That's great. Again, thank you all so much for participating in an event this year, and also for taking the time today out of your schedule to join us for this. I'm going to send all of this to you via email, the slides for this particular webinar and the recording. And if anyone has any questions at any time between now, during the meeting, before the meeting, feel free to reach out to us. We'll send you all of our contact information. No question is too small or too frivolous. Like, don't worry about it. This is what we're here for. We're here to help you. Don't worry about it. And just reach out to us at any point, and we'll be in touch over the next couple of weeks, multiple times, with more information for you, just to make sure everyone knows exactly what to do and what to expect. And during your events as well, we will reiterate all of this. We will say it, we will have it on slides. In the beginning, we'll have an opening slide that will reiterate all of this as well, for the reporters and for you. So don't worry if you're not sure exactly how something will work. We just want you to show up and be ready to give your presentation, and that's it. And if anyone has any other questions, like I said, feel free to email us at any point, and just look out for more contact from us in the next couple weeks.